gang, and welcome to the return of Apples and Oranges. I feel like it's been forever since I've done one of these as well. We are going to be covering, and I say we because Chris will be shortly joining me. I'll try to keep you guys and gals entertained until he comes on. And speak of the devil, he's not actually the devil. I would never say that about Chris, but he is backstage, and I will be adding him in just a sec. But we are going to be covering horror comedies. And I'm sure that I won't cover every horror comedy or every movie that you think is a horror comedy. I'm sure that Chris won't either. I'm going to try to touch on some of my favorite ones, but I finally just had to stop because I was like, we'll be here all night, if I get, too many movies on this list. So this might be another one of those things where we come back and do a part two to this. It may not be in apples and oranges. We may just do, who knows, maybe me and Candace will do a Friday Foolish on horror comedies, because unfortunately, I don't think Candace is going to be able to join us tonight. So perhaps we can do a horror comedy special for Friday Foolish at some point. Hey, Phil, um, what have I got coming up for the rest of the week? Well, Thursday will be another Kubrick Among Us. I'm going to be talking about another couple of Stanley Kubrick films. I have been getting some feedbacks or comments and otherwise about the first Kubrick show I did, and people are seeming to be receptive of it. So I'm hoping that continues. People seem to be big on Stanley Kubrick. He seems to be a hot commodity right now, or maybe Kubrick always was. I've always been interested in his filmmaking. Um, Friday, there will not be a Friday Foolish on Friday because this gal has got to work the late shift. I start at 1 and don't get off until 7 Eastern time. So that's going to severely cut into any time that we could utilize for Friday Foolish. But you guys and gals might get a surprise. Don't hold your breath, but you might get a surprise, and me and Candace might be able to do, something on Saturday, or we might be able to do a Sunday silly or something like that instead of doing a Friday Foolish this week. I personally am not real jazzed about working a late Friday, but that's the breaks, right? So I'll go ahead and do it and, move on from there. At least I get my weekend. I'm not having to work 4 hours on a Saturday or anything. And it is my plan to finally have a watch along for Phenomena. And I don't know if I'm going to do Suspiria or I'm going to do something totally different. I may switch it up and do something totally different than Argento. But hopefully Candace will be able, and maybe Chris if he wants to and can, for a watch along this weekend for Phenomena. And then we'll start right back over again next week. I'm trying to get more content out there. I promise you guys, the Highway to Hell for Horror Hound Weekend is coming. It's coming, but I hope those of you that have, or my friends on Facebook, or you're my friend on Instagram, or you're my friend on Twitter. Again, I refuse to call it X. That's Elon Musk's thing. I'll call it Twitter forever and ever and ever. So if you are my friend on one of those, or you follow me on one of those entities, then you more than likely have seen the picture of me and Candace with Mr. Robert England. I also have a couple other pictures on Facebook, one with me and Paul Clemens, who was in The Beast Within, and me with Mr. Peter Cowper, who was the miner and Harry Warden in the original My Bloody Valentine. So I got a lot coming up for this weekend, hopefully, a lot for the next week. Be on the lookout also for some new things to pop on the Deadites on Deck shop at deaditesondeck.com. We've got some holiday designs that are going to hit the site probably Novemberish, including a Christmas card set and some t-shirt designs for the holiday season. You can get all your friends and family members that like horror, you can buy them a shirt with one of these designs on it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and add Chris here. Hey, Chris.
Hey Dana, how's it going?
Good. Chris has got his Joe Bob shirt, or one of the Joe Bob shirts.
Yeah, it's season 4.
I don't know if I have that one. I don't think I have that particular design. But I'm supposed to get my night marathon shirt on Saturday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think this might. No, wait a minute. No, this is season 4, and I got the season 5 one as well, where it's got like Joe, Bob, and Darcy together, and it looks like they're like, working at like one of those old theater stands selling popcorn.
Yeah, I've got that one. That one's cool too.
But the last season, I'm hoping that Fright Rags does a reprint or something, because I didn't get that one. I would like to get it, but
X-ray, I'm not sure what that sound is. Chris, can you? Well, I don't hear it now. Well, I hear it a little bit now. He says, "What's with that weird music playing in the back?"
I didn't even have my mic set up. I didn't pay attention. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Can you hear me any better now?
I can hear you, but there's some sound in the background, and I don't know.
It's probably this air conditioner. Let me just.
Oh, okay.
What it was. Okay.
But I can hear you. I could hear that noise in the background, but I wasn't sure.
It was probably the air conditioner. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I'm unprofessional.
No, we don't want you to burn up either. So
No, I'm good. It's just cool in here. It's just like sometimes I get where I like to about freeze myself to death. I don't know.
X-ray says it's like whoop 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 whoop.
I bet it's this stupid computer. I bet, because I do hear like a humming noise now that you mentioned.
Oh, I see.
So I hope that's not too big of a distraction.
Well, we'll deal with it. I mean, it's not bothering me really. So
yeah, I don't know. I think it's something to do because I'm working off of Noah's laptop, and
gotcha.
I've been making this like kind of a weird noise for the past couple of weeks.
So my husband is in here too, and he's got the dollar signs. I guess because I was talking about my shop or something like that. I guess he's hoping people will spend money on my shop. That's all I can think about. Hey, Blissful. And Blissful also says hi to Chris and Ninja Steve.
Hey, I haven't been on here in a while, so I'm glad to be back for the first time.
Yeah, I'm glad to have Chris back on here too. X-ray says sounds like the noises Steve makes when watching hentai when Dana isn't around. I don't think Steve watches much of anything when I'm around or when I'm not around, because Steve's a sleepy man anymore. I mean, he does so much sleeping. I don't think he's watching much of anything.
I can't really blame him. I'm telling you, like this week that I've taken off from work for vacation, it's a really big relief. I haven't taken a vacation in a while, and all I do usually is just work. And so I've been resting quite a bit so far.
Well, you got to rest at some point in time. So, guys and gals, I guess we'll go ahead and get started with the matter at hand here. So, if you haven't figured it out, if you came in here late, You can't figure out what the heck I was talking about when I said apples and oranges. Would you like comedy with that? Um, the thing is, some people like comedy mixed with some of their horror movies. Some people hate it. Some people are indifferent about it. They could care, one way or the other, whether there's comedy in the horror or not. Um, I'm a person that doesn't like all my horror movies to have comedy in them. Sometimes I like a good, dark, scary horror movie. But other times I'm like, hey, I'm going to pull out one of those movies that's got comedy all the way through it, mixed in with the horrific elements. And I think it just depends on what kind of mood I'm in. But I definitely don't hate to have comedy mixed in the horror. It's not something that I dislike or I wish that they wouldn't do or something like that. But Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what you feel about horror comedies, and maybe talk about a couple of your favorites? I got a few that I can talk about tonight too.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to horror, one of my favorite subgenres of horror is comedy horror. Um, just because I think I've spoken this in the past on here on your streams, but like when it comes to horror, that's my favorite. That's my favorite genre of any kind of film. Um, but comedy, comedy genre is right up there with horror for me as well. Um, so I can say those are my two favorite genres. But when you mix them together, of course I'm gonna love it. But I've talked to some people who have different opinions on that, who love comedy, but they don't necessarily like it mixed with their horror. Yeah. It's not hooked up. Can you hear me real good, Dana?
I can hear you. You might be slightly lower than normal, Chris, but I could still hear you.
Okay, well, I'll go back to saying what I was saying here in just a second. Do you care if I just step out for just a minute and try to see if I can fix this?
Sure, yeah.
All right.
I'll keep everybody entertained. Okay, so while Chris is away, I guess I could start talking about, uh, one or two of my favorite ones. And I was actually going through a list of horror comedies before doing this stream, and I was like, I'm not really sure, I wasn't really sure about some of these. I just didn't think that of them as a horror comedy, but then I was like, yeah, they are a horror comedy. One of the ones I saw on the list, and this is a fun movie, folks. Bubba Hotep, uh, with Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis, directed by the great Don Coscarelli, who did the Phantasm series, of which I absolutely love the Phantasm series as well. All with, sadly, the exception of Ravager, which I've said before, I'll continue to say it. The Ravager, depresses me, but we're not talking about Ravager tonight.
Sorry about that, Dana. Does
Oh,
it sound?
that's much better. I
Does it
guess.
sound better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Me and Candace figured out what it was. It was I think Noah has been messing with the audio settings on his computer again, and it had taken like the actual microphone that I have here off of the audio and just using like the mic through the laptop.
Oh, I got
But but anyway, um, what I was saying before I left, I was like, I haven't met people who uh, don't that like horror and comedy, but they don't like the two mixed together.
you.
But that's not what we're not talking about. Those people tonight. Talking about those people now. We're talking about what I like. We're talking about what you
Yeah.
like, Dana. You know. So what I like, is comedy and horror. I do like when they're mixed together. And whenever I think of horror comedies, the first one right off the bat is the Evil Dead trilogy for me.
Mhm.
Um, Specifically, Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness.
Right.
While Evil Dead, the original, does have, some comedy elements to it, and, Sam Raimi being inspired by the Three Stooges, and that's why he named like all the fake, all the different Deadites, people that played Deadites in the Evil Dead films, fake shimps.
Mhm.
Um, so, I think that's why I love Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead movies and just all Sam Raimi's movies so much because I grew up with like loving the Three Stooges as well and that type of silly dumb humor. Um, and there's a lot of that in the Evil Dead films, especially Evil Dead 2, which is one of my favorite horror films of all time. Um, and that you just I don't know. There's something about it. Like when you look at the scene in Evil Dead 2, when all of the different inanimate objects in the cabin start coming to life and are laughing along with Ash, like the deer head and the lamp,
Yeah.
and just everything in there. And to me, that's one of the best scenes in the whole film because it's so stupid, but it's awesome.
You know what that always, well, actually, what the music video reminded me of was that scene in Evil Dead 2 that you just described. Is I don't know how many of you guys and gals have seen George Harrison's "Got My Mind Set on You"
Oh
video.
yeah, that's my favorite song by him. Yeah.
I love it. It always makes me happy and stuff like that, as several George Harrison songs do. But there is a scene where he's in, I think he's in like a cabin or a house, and there's things moving around
Oh
in it.
really?
And I always, every time I saw that video after watching Evil Dead 2, I was like, that's a strange correlation
Well,
between
did
that.
it was the video of that released before or after Evil Dead 2?
I want to say that that came out 87, 88, so it was
Okay.
probably around the same time. I don't know which actually came out first though.
I need to watch that because I've actually never seen the video for that. But I do know the song though because Candace would play it all the time because Candace, she's a huge Beatles fan too, and and just of all those guys' solo careers. So, she would always be playing stuff, randomly like that. And I remember that coming on like years ago when I think me and her were just dating at the time.
Mhm.
And I was like, who is this? She's like, it's George Harrison. I was like, oh, really? So I really like this. So like I've listened to that song quite a bit over time, but I need to check out the music video because I didn't know that, Dana.
Candace says she loves the video. She jumped in here. I saw her.
Mm.
She put that in there. So, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt Chris in the middle of
No, no, no. I think I was pretty much uh just rambling. I don't like I said, I don't have anything prepared and for this show. And I did that on purpose actually because um I love, that subgenre of comedy horror so much. I can easily rattle off several different, movies and or TV shows or anything like, which I guess we're just gonna be focusing on movies tonight. But I can rattle off several different ones. Like, I said the Evil Dead trilogy. And another one of the first ones that ever always comes to mind is which it's not really horror, but it's more of like a kid's horror, I guess. And that's Ernest Scared Stupid. And I'm a, I'm a huge Ernest fan, huge Jim Varney fan in general. I know that he's from Kentucky, and I
Mhm.
believe his gravesite is somewhere in Lexington. And I know I have a lot of friends that have actually got to visit his gravesite. I would like to eventually just to pay our respects to him and all that because he was a big thing for me growing up.
Yeah.
When I was a little kid, actually, I believe the Ernest films and the TV shows that came out a couple years. They started a couple years before I was born. I was born in '86, and I want to say that the Ernest films started in like 84 or 85. Um, but I
Yeah,
know
because there was Ernest Goes to Camp is
Ernest Goes to Camp
that's
and
the
Ernest Goes
first
to
one I
Jail,
remember
and
watching.
which before the movies that he had the show like Hey Vern, it's me
Yeah,
Ernest, and he did like the commercials for like Mellow Yellow and different.
I used to love those.
And I have this DVD somewhere that has like all these like it's like Ernest's greatest hits. It has like different like ads and commercials and stuff on there that he did before the film. But I the one that stuck with me the most out of all the Ernest that was Ernest Scared Stupid, mainly because I guess because it came out in the 90s, and around 91, 92, I think is when it came out. I could be wrong, but in that early 90s, I was about 5 or 6 years old probably, in the early 90s, and so like Ernest and Pee-wee's Playhouse, that was a big thing for me growing up. But Ernest Scared Stupid is just so great because it's I learned this later on that the trolls in Ernest Scared Stupid were reused costumes from Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which is another great horror comedy.
I've got that one on my list tonight.
But you also have like not only Jim Varney, who's in all the Ernest films, but in this one, one of the other main characters is Eartha Kitt, who plays the old like lady that lives in like the dump in the town, and everybody's afraid of her. And I love Eartha Kitt because I'm also a big fan of the Batman 1966 TV show, where she was the third Catwoman on the show, because I believe they started with Julie Newmar, and then Lee Merriweather played Catwoman in the Batman movie. And then towards the end of the series, they brought in Eartha Kitt to play Catwoman. Um, but it's just, it's even though it's an Ernest film, Ernest Scared Stupid, it has a very like odd vibe to it, to where it feels like horror. I guess it's because you got this troll that comes along, and he's like not really killing kids, but he's like turning them into little wooden statues, and it's giving them power to, like, because these trolls, if they get hit by any kind of dairy products like milk or anything like that, that's what kills them. But
Right,
this main troll is like taking all of these children's souls, and it's making them more powerful to be immune to that, I guess.
right.
Which, if you find out in the end, that's what happens, and the only thing that can defeat him is the heart of a child,
Mhm.
which comes from Ernest, of course.
Right.
Um, and
X-Ray says Ernest Scared Stupid and Troll 2 are the same movie.
oh no, that's not true. That is not, no way is that true. I mean, that's a good double feature for me. I
Yeah,
love Troll 2,
that would make
but
it good.
oh no, I can't say other than the whole troll thing,
Uh,
which they're not even trolls in Troll 2. They're goblins. They're in Nilbog, which is
yeah,
goblins spelled backwards. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I can't agree with you there on that X-ray, but love both movies though.
and I think Freaked counts X-Ray. If you want to count Freaked as a horror
I
comedy, I think
would.
it
I
definitely
I
fits in.
definitely would.
Mhm. And I was reading through some of these. I'll read a few more of these. Now, Blissful says wasn't Ernest trained or Jim Barney trained as a Shakespearean actor?
Uh,
I'm trying to remember.
it's a possibility, because I mean, if you look at all in the Ernest films, like he plays like he has like multiple personalities in different parts of the film, where it shows him like he's dressed up as the lady with the glasses and the neck brace, and then like there's tons of different ones, like in Ernest Scared Stupid, where like there's one where he's dressed up like a Mongolian,
Yeah.
and there's like a one where he's got like a lumberjack. I think he's got like flannel and suspenders and stuff. So I mean, I think
He
That
does
may
that
be
in
true.
Ernest Saves Christmas too, because he was playing all different characters. Remember
Yeah.
when he played the snake
Oh,
ranger?
oh yeah, that's one of Candace's favorites is the
Yeah.
when he does like the snake handler guy. But I think that's very possible. I'm not 100% on that blissful, but I mean, for him to be able to control those, or have that ability, I guess I could say, to play though that many different characters in within one thing to show like his levels of acting. Um, I think Shakespeare would be something someone would study to be able to do that. And if you also look at like when Jim Varney played like the rich guy in the Roseanne TV show that
Yeah.
I think was it Jackie was dating him. Um,
Yeah, was he the one that was that prince?
yeah, that's what
Like,
I'm saying. Like he kind of had like more kind of an English like Shakespearean um, you know role about him in that. So, but I don't know. That's something worth looking into for sure.
and TJ mentions, hey TJ, by the way, he says, Return of the Living Dead, one of the greatest horror comedies, like when the kids run off and Trash is crying. I definitely had Return of the Living Dead on my list tonight as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, that's another one I would put up there. Like I said, I'm just shooting from the hip tonight. I'm just kind of talking about whatever comes to mind. And
That's
but I said there's so many. There's so many we could really cover, and it might be get to that point to where, like you said before I came on here, you may have to do a part two to this.
Or we'll do a special Friday Foolish show, like I said, me and Candace, because I know Candace she would have loved to come on here
Yeah.
tonight if she wasn't busy with other, important things like helping Noah with the schoolwork. That's a priority, of course, before coming on these live
Well,
streams.
Return of the Living Dead, there's a lot to unpack on that one. I feel like we could do a whole show on just Return of the Living Dead.
We definitely could. Return of the Living Dead is. I gotta tell a little story about Return of the Living Dead real quick. One day I was really pissed off about living in Louisville, and anybody that has seen Return of the Living Dead knows that we know it wasn't really Louisville. They didn't film it in Louisville.
Yeah,
They
Louisville
filmed it
didn't
in
really get
California.
blown up, guys.
It didn't get nuked. But I was really pissed off and angry. It seemed like everything was going wrong. And I was just like, I just hate this town right now. So I sat down and I watched Return of the Living Dead. And when it got to the end where they nuked Louisville, Kentucky, I was like, yeah, yes. That was just the catharsis I needed, a cinematic catharsis where I didn't really want them to nuke Louisville. I didn't really want anybody to come bomb Louisville because I'm here. I don't want to die, and I don't want anybody else to die. I was just pissed off. So, metaphorically speaking, I felt like I needed that catharsis. I needed to watch through a film Louisville being blown up. And if you don't believe me that they seem to blow up Louisville, Kentucky, it says right there on the screen, Louisville, Kentucky, and it's got the time and all that. But it's obviously California that they're filming this movie in. They only blew up a few blocks, TJ. Yeah, yeah, it was just a few blocks of Louisville, like a few neighborhoods. So, but anyway, sorry, Chris. I
No,
got
no,
off
no.
on
You're
it.
fine. Keep going if you want.
I see or I hear the ring doorbell.
Yeah,
Well,
that was on my phone. Sorry about that.
oh no, that's no
Uh,
problem. The one I was talking about a little bit when Chris had to go away to fix his microphone was Bubba Hotep. Like I said, it's filmed by the great Don Coscarelli, who I absolutely love as a not only as a horror director, but Don Coscarelli early on did things like Kenny and Company
mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. That is essentially a kid kind of family oriented type of film. But it really gets to the heart of things. I mean, it's a really good film, a really good early film from Don Coscarelli.
And
But
isn't it Kenny and Company? Doesn't so Michael Baldwin who plays in the fan, isn't he in Kenny and Company as well?
yeah,
And I want to say that Ari Lehman has a part in that too.
I think Ari Lehman is in that. Yeah, I'm
Is it
pretty
okay?
sure.
It's been a long time since I've seen Kenny and Company, um, and another Don Coscarelli film, Survival Quest.
That's
It's been a
right.
while since I've seen those as well. I'm wanting to watch the Phantasm movies again here soon
Oh,
because
I got yeah. Those are my. For some reason, those are Halloween fall
mhm,
type movies for me,
right. And I
especially.
just bought I just bought my tickets for Scarefest right before I got on here.
Uh huh.
So and they're having the big Phantasm thing
Right.
at Scarefest this year. So I know Don Coscarelli's going to be at that. So I'm hoping to get to meet him finally.
Yeah, he's a real nice guy. He's a little, he's not completely reserved, but he's a little reserved, but he's very, very nice. I met him several years ago. I got to meet Angus Scrimm before, sadly, Angus Scrimm passed away. I got to meet Michael Baldwin. I got to meet Reggie Bannister. Got to meet Bill Thornberry. Basically, the only person I didn't go up and meet, and I think that was because I ran out of money, was Kathy Lester, who
Mhm.
played the lady in lavender in the film.
Which I've seen some people talking about that's going to Scarefest, and they're like, it sucks that Angus Scrimm is dead, and he's not going to be able to be part of this big reunion at Scarefest. I said, we got to have the tall man there. And I was like, well, technically, the tall man is going to be there in the form of Kathy Lester
There you go. Yeah.
because the lady in lavender, lady in purple, whatever she was called in the film, um, she was just a form of the tall man.
Yes, she was.
So I'm excited to meet some of those people. Like I've only from the Phantasm films, I've only got to meet A. Michael Baldwin and Reggie Bannister.
Mhm.
I do have Angus's autograph on my poster though,
Uh-huh.
because I was able to send it with a friend that went and met him at Monster Mania years ago. Um, so, but I mean, I have his autograph on my poster. I'm fine with that, but I just hate it that I never got to meet him.
Yeah.
Um, but
He was a very nice man. I know when I met him, of course, he was a lot older when I met him. This was right before, uh, within probably a year or two of him passing away when
mhm.
I met him. And someone had just brought him his lunch. And I was like, um, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're having your lunch." And he's like, "No, no, no, no." He's like, it's fine." He said, "I can eat later." But I thought, here is a man that, he's getting up there in age. I don't want to keep the man from eating his lunch. But he insisted that I sit down there and talk to him for a little bit. I had him sign my Phantasm sphere. I have the new set that comes with a sphere, but I also
Mhm.
have the old UK set that had the sphere, and that's the one that I've had everybody sign for me.
See, I don't have a sphere. That's something that I need to get. I would love to get one before Scarefest.
Mhm.
So I'd like to have Don Coscarelli at least sign it. He may be the only person I would get an autograph on that because I know I'm not going to be able to get Angus on it. So if I could just get one person, it would be the director.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
but you were talking about Bubba Hotep though, like,
Yeah,
um,
Bubba Hotep, I
so
absolutely
good.
love this film. It is so funny, but it's got Bubba Hotep in it, and he's
Mhm.
one mean soul sucker, and literally, he is a soul sucker. And what he is doing is he's feeding off the souls of the people in this nursing home. But what is so fantastic about this, you have Mr. Bruce Campbell playing the real
The
Elvis.
real Elvis.
because the way he tells the story, he allowed a Elvis impersonator to take his place
Mm,
early on, and he kind of went into a hiding as a regular guy, that was a Elvis impersonator. He kind
yeah,
of just switched places with the guy. And so the Elvis impersonator was the one who died,
yeah,
and everybody thought that was the real Elvis Presley. Meanwhile, he's living in a nursing home now with, excuse me, sensitive people out there. He's got cancer on his dick, folks. I mean, and
yeah.
he has to have it treated. A nurse has to come in there and she has to put some kind of salve all over his penis. Yes, he has cancer of the penis. But that doesn't keep him from fighting the soul sucking mummy in this nursing home. Then you have Ossie Davis, who plays an African American
JFK.
JFK, and he swears that he is JFK. He says, I am John F. Kennedy. So you have all this stuff in the film, and it's just so much fun. I would actually like to read the original short story that this is based on by Joe R. Lansdale, because Joe R. Lansdale is known for kind of in his stories. I know, like Chris said, we're concentrating on movies tonight, but this one is based on a short story by Joe R. Lansdale, and I
Mhm.
think he is pretty much known for mixing and matching the horror and comedy elements. So we have to give credit where credit is due. Joe R. Lansdale did the source material for this. And then Don Coscarelli and Bruce Campbell and Ossie Davis and all those other great actors in the film brought Joe R. Lansdale's short story to life. Very in a very exceptional way. And I actually need to go back and rewatch this again because I remember absolutely loving it.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it again sometime soon too. Because, like I said, I was wanting to rewatch the Phantasm films because of Don Coscarelli being at Scarefest. But I would also like to, catch up on some of his other films, including this Bubba Hotep as well. Um, my dad loves Bubba Hotep, and I introduced that to him several years ago. When he was looking for something to watch. He said he wanted to watch a horror film. And
Mhm.
he said just pick one out for me that you like. And my dad, is very picky, and he will let you know if he doesn't like something or not.
Right.
Um, and he typically doesn't like more modern horror films. Um, but I said, Dad, I said, hear me out on this. I said, watch this movie. I said, I know you're a big my dad loves Elvis.
Mhm.
I said, Dad, you were the one that introduced me to the Evil Dead films with Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
So that's it. I said, this has got Bruce Campbell in it, and he's playing Elvis, and he's in a nursing home. And he's like, huh? I was like, yeah. And he's playing the real Elvis. I said, it explains why he's the real Elvis in the nursing home. I said, you just got to watch it. He said, but he said, it's a horror movie. I'm like, yeah, I said, I don't want to give really anything away. I said, just watch it. I don't want to give you anything. Just watch it. I think you'll like it. And so I was kind of nervous. I was like, because I let him watch it. And I was like, I bet he will end up not liking this. But he loves it. He loved it. He's watched it many times now. And he always asks about if, like, when I'm going to horror conventions and stuff, if I ever see any kind of Bubba Hotep stuff. Like that. But this weekend, when I went to Horror Hound in Cincinnati, he was having me look for Svengoolie stuff for him, which is
Right.
very hard to find apparently because I went around to every vendor at Horror Hound looking for stickers, whatever of Svengoolie I could find, and nobody really had anything except for one guy. He had some little pins for like $1 each, but that's it. But he was like really the only person because every person I asked said that they have made Svengoolie, like merchandise with stickers or what posters or whatever,
And apparently there's a big legal issue now with MeTV and
Mm.
Svengoolie, and they're putting out all these cease and desist stuff on people's like art and stuff of Svengoolie. So if you want any Svengoolie stuff, best just go to metv.com and buy
There you
it
go.
because you're not going to find it at a convention, apparently. But
Wow.
sorry.
I was almost afraid that's what you were going to say, Chris. It was one of those cease and desist type of deals.
Yeah. But yeah, my dad, he loves Bubba Hotep, and I'm really glad, because like um I didn't, like I said, when I showed it to him years back, I didn't know if he's gonna like it. But I knew, I was like, well, it has to do with Elvis. I mean, my dad loves anything Elvis, so, and he does now, and he always asks about it because he asked about it actually not too long ago because he said he was wanting a copy of it on DVD because my dad won't go past anything past DVDs. He doesn't fool with Blu-rays, so he certainly won't deal with 4Ks or anything like that. My dad's a VHS and DVD guy through and through. Um, so I guess that's the next thing on my list is try to find him Bubba Hotep on DVD for him.
There you go. And you probably could. You might have to go the eBay route or some of the
Yeah,
used.
it's probably on Amazon too.
Mhm. Yeah, probably still
Which
yet.
I have it, but I'm not going to give him my copy or anything. He get his own.
Yeah, you're not getting my copy, Dad. uh, my dad, that made me think about my dad and how he is about movies. One of Dad's all-time favorite movies several years ago was Braveheart, and he watched it and he watched it and he watched it. And so this was back when DVD was out, but VHS was still king, if that makes any sense. And so I bought my dad Braveheart on a double VHS set. And Chris, he never watched that thing on VHS. He said, Dana, that's very nice of you. I said, but Dad, you can watch it anytime you want now. You don't have to wait for it to come on, a cable or satellite channel or whatever. He said, I know, but he said, I'm just one of those people that just channel surfs. And if I find something I like, I'll watch it. So it does no good to buy my dad any VHS
I
or
totally get that though. Like I'm the same way in some aspects. Like I'll have stuff on DVD, Blu-ray, whatever kind of physical format. But if and I see it on streaming services though, I
yeah.
will watch it on streaming before I'll go and get
It's
my
a matter of
copy off the shelf.
convenience, I think. I get lazy sometimes and I'll be looking at Shutter or
Mhm.
something and I'll be like, well, I have that on a shiny new 4K. I could step back here and get it. What the heck? I'll just turn it on Shutter and just sit there and
Yeah,
watch
but I was always like that too when I was a kid, really, or growing up when I still had cable before I switched over to just Wi-Fi and streaming and all that. When I just had regular cable growing up, like I would not watch a movie like for the longest time, but if it showed up on TV on some channel or like TBS or TNT or whatever, like when they were showing like Monster Vision with Joe Bob, like he would show stuff on TNT. Um, and I was like, well, I have that movie on VHS or whatever at that time. But I was like, but I hadn't watched it, my copy for like in forever. But I was like, but because it's on TV, because Joe Bob's showing it, I'll watch it now.
Yeah.
And I still do that to this day. Like when Joe Bob shows stuff on the last drive-in, it'll be stuff that I haven't watched in forever, but because Joe Bob is showing it, I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
game for that.
Watch it. So, Chris, if you want me to stop, I can and turn it back over to you, or I can just
No,
pull.
you can go. You go ahead because I talked about Evil Dead trilogy and Ernest Scared Stupid, and you just got to talk about Bubba Hotep a little bit. So you can go with another one if you like.
Okay, well, I don't actually. Shame on me, by the way. I think Steve has a physical copy. Where I was too lazy to go look for his copy, but Shaun of the Dead was one of those that I just watched on a whim, and that is where I fell in love with Simon Pegg stuff. I know he had done other things, but Shaun of the Dead was the thing that caught my eye. And it was just so funny because it seemed to take everything that we loved, for those of us that love the George Romero zombies, the Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead stuff, that early stuff, and it just flipped it upside down. It had similarities,
Mm.
but I think the thing was George Romero wasn't really trying to be funny with his zombies. I know sometimes there were things that made us ha ha, to chuckle a little bit. And that's no disrespect to George Romero. I love George Romero, and the memory of George Romero is always going to be in my mind. I love George Romero so much that one of my guinea pigs is named Romero, after George Romero, and the other one's named after Robert England. His name's England. So I have two guinea pigs, Romero and England. They're both named after horror guys. So I have great respect for George Romero, but I think that George Romero was trying to do two things, I felt like, with his zombie films. Is he was trying to make a social statement, and he was also trying to make a decent horror movie. And I think he achieved both things. But I think Simon Pegg, I think he was just, if you could make a balls to the wall comedic horror film, I think that's what Simon Pegg was trying to do with Shaun of the Dead. He wanted you to laugh at this. And some of the audacious things that they did during this zombie apocalypse, or whatever you want to call it, what just made me laugh. I think I laughed throughout the entire film. Um, Now, Chris, are you a big fan of Shaun of the Dead?
Oh, absolutely. I was just letting you get out all you had to say before I was say anything, but yeah, I love Shaun of the Dead. I think the guy that directed was Edgar Wright. Um, and I know Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, who play Sean and
Yeah,
Ed respectively in the film, but I'm familiar with some of the rest of the cast in it, but not as much as I am as the main two, which is Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. And I don't want to give too much away, but I've been hearing things about a particular convention next year might be having those guys at their show.
mm,
So I'll just leave it at that, for anybody to try to be, if you're curious,
put the
because
puzzle pieces
I
together.
don't want to get in trouble with people that I know that have told me things. but,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, I'm a huge fan of Shaun of the Dead. I mean, there's like the scene in the film, when they're standing in the backyard and they had the box of records and they're just throwing the records at these zombies.
Right.
I love that. And I love like how they keep he's trying to figure out the plan of how they're going to get to the Winchester. So like
Yep.
they show like this kind of almost like a montage of like their plan, what they're going to do, then the next step, which all leads them to the Winchester. But I think it's Ed that keeps like popping up like these scenarios that could happen of
Mm.
what other things that they need to do in order for to get from point A to point B. So it's kind of like, Dawn of the Dead meets Monty Python.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That is a great analogy
Yeah.
there.
And
Yeah.
it's that's another thing I'm a huge fan of is Monty Python.
Me too. My brother got me into Monty Python.
Yeah, I got into Monty Python. I can't remember how long. I think I was in high school at the time when I had this friend that I made in a history class, and we kind of like the same movies and stuff. And he asked me, "Have you ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail?" And I said no. So he started telling me about it, what it's about. And then, like he said, yeah, and Monty Python, they make these other movies. They had a TV show called Monty Python's Flying Circus. They did The Meaning of Life. They did Life of Brian. There's just a lot of different things. And so I remember after learning about that, I went straight to like my video store that weekend and checked out Monty Python the Holy Grail. And I think I also rented Life of Brian at the same time.
Right.
And Holy Grail is definitely my favorite one of those. But you can definitely see, if you know that type of humor I'm talking about with Monty Python, that's definitely in Shaun of the Dead.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's just that British humor.
And British humor is very different than American humor. I'll just tell you that, right?
Because Simon Pegg, before Shaun of the Dead, came from a British comedy TV series too, which is kind of like dry humor. It was called Spaced. So they were it was about like these group of friends who were big sci-fi nerds. And it may be available on one of the streaming services. I don't know, but if you're a Simon Pegg fan, it's worth checking out for sure.
So something else, and this is totally unrelated to the horror comedy element, but since we're talking about British comedies and stuff, I am a huge fan of the IT crowd, and
me and Candace are too.
Y'all love that too.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have ever been in an IT job, I think you will love it even more. I'm not saying people outside of IT won't love it, but if you work at an IT job, or you have in the past, you will totally get some of the stuff in here, because the first time the one guy picked up the phone, he said, "Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again?" I started laughing because 9 times out of 10, that's what you tell people to do to fix a computer issue. I know it sounds asinine. It sounds like it couldn't possibly work about 98 or so percent of the time, but it does. So that really, when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, it just resonated so much as an IT professional to me, that he said that. That was the first thing I heard that guy say.
And just, I don't want to get too off topic, but just because you brought up the IT crowd, I gotta mention my favorite episode of the whole series is when they go to this play, and I forget the guy's name, the main character of the show, where he goes to the bathroom. And he can't go to the regular bathroom, so he goes upstairs and finds the handicap bathroom, and he's afraid he's like nervous of going in there, and he's like, so he ends up getting going in there. He's like, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'll be real quick. So he goes in there and he's using it, and then like someone comes and knocks on the door, and he just does this whole thing. I'm disabled. And that's just a running joke throughout the whole episode, and it's really hard to explain and give visuals, describing visuals of the show to people. But all I can say is just watch the IT crowd if you've never seen it. It's got some really, really crazy humor in it, like that. It's an acquired taste, I guess you could say.
I think so.
But I think, people, if they've not seen it, to at least give it a chance to see what you think, because from the very first episode of that show, like, you kind of get an idea what the humor is going to be like for the rest of the series. So it's just kind of one of those things, like, you may like it, you may not like it. I personally, me and Candace, we love it. But I like a lot of British humor stuff.
I do too.
Especially, said Monty Python, and Mr. Bean is another huge, huge thing for me and Candace. And it's crazy how, and not to get too off topic, but it's crazy how British TV shows work as far as syndication goes. Because you look at Mr. Bean, and it felt like that show was on for years, and it was, but there's only like 2 or 3 seasons. But what they do with British TV shows is they'll like release like a few episodes
Mm-hmm.
and then like let it go by like I guess a few months or something, and then more episodes will come out. Another British TV show, sci-fi, that Candace loves, it's like that has been going on for years and years, even though it doesn't seem like it, but because there's there wouldn't like years and years and years of episodes like that you would see in regular like US TV series, is Red Dwarf. And I think it's still going to this day. Like it's the same cast and everything from I'm pretty sure, but yeah, I guess we could get back on topic
Yeah.
now.
I'm going to tell one more little anecdote about the IT crowd because Chris was talking about one
Oh
of his
yeah,
favorite episodes. One of my favorite episodes was when they had the emergency phone system, and it made it so complicated that nobody could get help in an emergency. And Moss had caused a fire
Mhm.
in the office, and he was trying to get the fire department to come and put it out, and like when everybody else came back there was fire all over the office and stuff. But I just found that to just be so hilarious.
But
uh
yeah, maybe that's a topic you can do for another stream. Sometimes it's like
yeah.
British television or something.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do that. Maybe me and Candace could do a Friday
Oh
Foolish on
yeah,
that
that'd be
as well.
fun.
Blissel says she loves British television more so than anything. Yeah, I think I mean, it's an acquired taste. It's definitely an acquired taste. But if you love it, you love it. That's one of those. I'm a huge fan of Peter Sellers
Yeah.
too. I can watch Peter Sellers in anything.
And
But
one of my favorite TV shows of all time, which is The Office. It's the US version of it is one of my. But before the US version, there was a British version of The Office with Ricky Gervais was on. And there's a lot of like British TV shows that I really do like, but there's ones out there that I don't really care for too. And while it's not, I brought up The Office because even though we are just talking about movies on this stream for horror comedies, um, there is a TV show which is one of my favorite shows right now on TV, and they're getting ready to go into the last season, and that's What We Do in the Shadows.
yeah,
Which it's like The Office mixed with vampires, and it's also kind of tied to the IT crowd that we were talking about because Matt Berry was the boss
yeah.
in IT crowd, and he plays Laszlo in What We Do in the Shadows.
Okay.
But have you ever watched What We Do in the Shadows,
I
Dana?
have not, but I did when I was coming up with my list of horror comedies. That one kept popping up.
Yeah, because there is a movie that like they started off with like a mockumentary because that's the style and how the show is shot. It's like a mockumentary because they're like its film crew is just following these vampires' lives. So it started out with that movie, which is a completely different cast, but at the same time, it's linked to the TV show because the characters that are in the movie show up later in the TV series. And like I said, they're going into their last season coming up here now, and I'm sad in a way because, like I said, it's one of my favorite shows right now, and it's going to be gone after this season. There's a lot of shows like that right now. Like Stranger Things is getting ready to go into their last season. That's another one of my favorite shows right now. So, well, I guess it looks like I'm going to have to find me some new shows to watch, Dana.
There you go. And you can take a dip into the pool that is like, because that's something that I look at Steve and he's always watching something different. And I'm like, how in the heck do you keep up with all this stuff? He's been watching Bad Monkey with Vince Vaughn in it lately, based on a series of books. And I love that show, and I wish that I could actually sit down with him and watch it. But usually, when he's watching it, I'm back here working, so I don't get to sit down and watch it with him.
Right.
I guess I could watch it because he's downloading them. I could watch them at a later time if I wanted to. Um, but I guess, before we get too off topic, I'll talk about, I've really talked about Return of the Living Dead. I'll talk about these next three very briefly because me and Chris have kind of danced around these three a little bit. But Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This is my steel book that I just got not very long ago. I haven't watched it yet. I need to watch this thing. But Killer Clowns from Outer Space. How can you go wrong with something with that title? And you have these clowns that don't they have popcorn guns
They
as
have
well, Chris?
they have popcorn guns. They have cotton candy
Cotton
guns.
candy
Actually,
guns.
right here, this is the popcorn gun.
Yep. Candace and Chris and Noah, they have some cool killer
And
clown
you
stuff.
can't see it, but right here, sitting where I just grabbed that popcorn gun, is the animatronic from Spirit Halloween stores of Shorty, the one with the boxing gloves.
Yeah.
So we have that, and then we got some posters like hanging up here in Noah's room because Noah loves Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I think this is
Can you
probably
blame
like
him? Can you
I
blame
think it's the first like horror like movie that he's kind of come obsessed with because he's got over here on his shelf, he's got like all the pop figures, including the blacklight pop figures of Killer Clowns. Back here on his wall, I don't know if you can't see it on my camera, but I might move a little bit. It's like it's kind of over here, right there behind me. You can't see that, but that's the 27 by 40 original like poster of Killer Clowns,
Cool.
and I had it signed by the Chiodo brothers several years ago, and then so since technically Noah's first name is Christopher, but we just call him by his middle name, Noah. It's signed to him too, just as much as it was signed to me. So I let him have that to put on his wall because he absolutely loves Killer Clowns.
And you can't go wrong with Killer Clowns from Outer Space. If you want to watch something where you can totally immerse yourself in just zany comedy, and there's another thing, I love that. I love these little
Yeah,
guns.
that's the cotton candy gun.
And what they do with the cotton candy gun, in case you haven't seen Killer Clowns, is they they make a cocoon and they put people in these cotton candy cocoons basically, and they hang them in their spaceship, which looks like a circus tent. I kid you not, their spaceship looks like a circus.
And they make those too. That's another thing. They make like the replica big, huge cocoons of the cotton candy cocoons. But like, we would love to have one of those too, but we're kind of running out of room. I don't think we have anywhere to put that.
But it'd be cool. So if you do have the room and can get your hands on one, I would highly recommend something like that.
There's all kinds of Killer Clown stuff out there. I don't really know like where it came from. Like, you know what I mean? Like the popularity of it just kind of blew up in the last few years. There's a video game of it out now. There's like, every year at I think Spirit Halloween was probably like what kicked it off because I think they just got like the rights to that stuff to sell it through their stores, and it just kind of started appealing, I guess, to kids in some way. I don't know. Like, I know there's tons and tons of merchandise for Killer Clowns out there now. And I would never have expected that like years ago,
And you don't have to think a lot about this movie. I talk about that a lot, that sometimes you just want to watch something without a complicated plot. And how uncomplicated can you get that these clowns, and they're killer clowns, they come from outer space, they're using cotton candy guns, they're using popcorn guns, they're standing out on the street corner and just looking kind of goofy until you mess with them, and then next thing you know, you're in a cotton candy cocoon hanging in their, circus tent spaceship. Uh, but you don't have to put any thought process behind something like this. And I don't think the creators wanted you to have to think about it. They're just saying, hey, we're putting this craziness out there in front of you. You either like it or you don't. But I think the consensus is by most people that have seen this movie is that they love the movie.
I'll be right back, Dana. Sorry, Candace says she's locked out of the house.
Oh my gosh, that's not good. Okay. So I will keep y'all entertained. We'll go ahead and continue with this. If Chris wants to say some more about Killer Clowns when he comes back, he is more than welcome to. Yes, Russell. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. You said that's the greatest horror comedy of all time. I love Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And that is a movie that me and Steve always have playing in the background on Halloween night when the trick-or-treaters are coming up to the door, because for one thing, it's a great film. And number two, we don't have to worry about the little kiddos that are coming to get their treats, singing anything that they shouldn't on our big screen TV. So Steve always puts that on every Halloween. One, because we both love it. Two, it's a safe thing to have on in the background when the kids come up to get their candy and stuff. But we did talk a little bit about Army of Darkness earlier. And Chris, if you want to say anything more about Killer Clowns, feel free. I just kind of moved on to Army of Darkness.
I mean, what can you say about Killer Clowns that's not already been said? I mean, I love it. It's like it's right up there. When it comes to horror comedies, it's probably like definitely my top 10. I don't know. I'd have to think about what my top horror comedies were, but I know Killer Clowns for me, just on a personal level, is probably in my top 10, just because it was another one of those early horror comedies that I discovered and really just fell in love with the goofiness of it all and just everything. Like, they're clowns, but they're aliens basically.
Yeah.
And they're just coming here just to take over the earth. And they start, and who else better to start with than Royal Dano in the beginning of the film? I mean, that's just, to me, it's iconic. Killer Clowns is iconic. Whether you're not really into the horror comedy like subgenre or not, I find it hard for anybody to not enjoy Killer Clowns. Because just you got so many like crazy scenes within the film, from Shorty where he encounters the biker gang and he knocks the guy's head off, or you got I believe I think it's Slim that does like the puppet. It turns his hands into the dinosaur and eats the one guy. And then you got the scene where they're in the bathroom and the popcorn starts coming out like the trash cans, and it's like the clown heads on these big long necks, almost like snakes or something. Just so much going on with in that film, and it just seems to me that because I spoke about Ernest Scared Stupid earlier, and like I said, a lot of the troll costumes in Ernest Scared Stupid were just reuse costumes from Killer Clowns. Because they hired the Chiodo brothers to do all the troll effects on Ernest Scared Stupid. And it just seems to me when those guys are involved with the effects team on a film, there's always going to be something crazy, like if you look at the Critters movies, the Chiodos created the little critters creature, the Krites, I guess you could call them.
Krites, yeah.
Because that's what they were actually called, was Krites, I believe, in the Critters films. Because I always remember in Critters 2 when Lee turns into like the Playboy model, and she would always say "kill Krites."
Yes.
And I love it. But yeah, you can't. I feel like if the Chiodos are attached to a film when it comes to effects, you can't go wrong with that film. It's always going to be fun and entertaining. But yeah,
Yeah. Now, Chris, I got to ask you this because there are some people that have an aversion to clowns. Do you
well,
do you feel like a movie like Killer Clowns from Outer Space would cure them of that aversion, or do you think it would make it worse?
depends on how severe it is.
Okay.
Um, if it's really bad, then hell no. I don't think it's going to, because as fun as entertaining as Killer Clowns is to me, um, I can admit that some of the parts of the film can be pretty creepy or pretty freaky.
Yeah.
Um, so, like, the I believe it's a scene where it's either the Spike or Slim clown. He's a really tall clown, and he finds two people to get, and he uses the cotton candy gun on them, and
Yeah.
then right after he does that and turns them in, it like has this zoomed in shot of him with his head reared back and he's laughing, and you see like the spiky teeth and
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So that's very creepy. And for someone that has already a fear of clowns, I can imagine that that would scare them to death probably and not make it any better.
Right. I always think of like Tim Curry's Pennywise whenever I think of people having fears of clowns because I think that Tim Curry's version of Pennywise was what terrified television viewers for some time to come because that was a dang mini series on
Mm,
television, and it was one of the first Stephen King miniseries. I remember watching it. Uh, I mean, there was like Salem's Lot, but I was too
mm,
young when Salem's Lot first came out. I was maybe all of 2 or 3 years old when that originally came out. I watched that later, but I think for me, the first true Stephen King miniseries that I remember watching first time out was it, and I just absolutely loved it. And I remember getting a shirt from Bet's bookstore up in Maine. And they have a, because that's Stephen King's home turf. Maine is Stephen King's home turf. So Bet's bookstore had T-shirts. They had all of Stephen King's books. They had everything that you could think of Stephen King related. So I bought this shirt from them years and years ago. I'm sure it's long gone now, but it had a bunch of different characters from Stephen King's books. And at the forefront was on Pennywise looking very evil on there. And I would wear that. Don't ask me how. You probably couldn't get away with wearing this to school now. But I used to wear that shirt to school. And I'd be on the school bus and people would be saying, Dana, please don't wear that thing anymore. I hate clowns. I hate Pennywise, especially. I don't want to look at that shirt anymore. I'd be like, I'm sorry, but I love this shirt.
honestly, schools have kind of changed nowadays. I don't think they really care what you wear nowadays in
As
school.
long as you got something on, you're not coming
Yeah,
naked.
and as long as it's not like too crazy or anything. But because I can
Right.
remember, like, I'm glad you mentioned that because when I was in school back in the '90s, back when this is the late '90s when wrestling was pretty much kind of taking over the world, but with because everybody, you didn't even have to be a wrestling fan to know who Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock was, or Undertaker, because that was in a time when wrestling was coming very pop culture-ish.
Yeah.
Um, well, naturally, kids that actually did love wrestling would want to buy T-shirts during that time so they could wear to school or wherever. Um, and the school I went to, at least, and I've told this to Candace probably 100 times, and she's always like, "That's so bizarre." But like with the school that I went to, um, it was like so big of a thing. Like, a ton of kids were wearing wrestling shirts because it was just it was a huge thing in our area. People loved wrestling, and it didn't matter if it was Stone Cold, if it was the Undertaker, if it was Degeneration X. If you had those kinds of shirts on, you were going to the principal's office, and then you were then taken to the Family Resource Center to find a new shirt to put on.
Holy cow!
And if it happened again, if you came to school again wearing a wrestling shirt, you were suspended. So, yeah, very strict and strange rules that my school had when I was in elementary
I'm
school.
glad I didn't go to your school, Chris.
Yeah.
I
So
would have bet they would have thought I was the devil incarnate with my shirt.
as far as like horror movie, I never seen anybody at my school wearing horror movie shirts because I don't think it was like a really big thing during that time. And you are really anything that was kind of accessible like as it is now to horror shirts. But no, I can't really speak on that. But as far if it was wrestling though, if it was WWF, then you're in trouble.
Wow.
I know it's very strange. But
Did you end up in the principal's office, Chris, ever?
well, I did, like I said, one time, and I hated getting in trouble when I was a kid in school for because I was always afraid that like if something bad happened at school, and then like I was going to be in for it when I got home from my parents because they would. My parents weren't super strict or anything, but they didn't want me getting in trouble, and if I did, then I would, that would mean like no wrestling for a week or no video games or something. But I remember I got sent there one time, and I think I was wearing like a Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt, Austin 316 shirt. And so I had to, they were pretty nice with me and everything. Like they said, you can't wear that. They knew I was a good kid. And it's like, you can't wear that here. Sorry. And then I had to go to the Family Resource Center and find a new shirt to wear for the rest of the day. And then I remember coming home that day and like I brought my wrestling shirt back home with me, but I had a different shirt on. My mom was like, why are you wearing a different shirt? Like, where'd you get that shirt from? And I had to make up this whole story. Like they never knew that I went to the principal's office. They never knew the whole reason behind the whole wrestling. I just didn't wear them anymore after that. I just told my mom something like, "Oh, I didn't feel like wearing it. I went to talk to Judy at the Family Resource Center, which my mom knew her and everything. So I just wanted to get me a new shirt, but." I risked by telling her that, like, because I said she knew the lady from the resource center, Judy, that my mom could have possibly spoke to her about, but thankfully it never came up. So,
so do they know now, Chris?
No, my mom doesn't know this day. So,
well, let's hope she
like
doesn't
30 years ago.
Stream. She'll be calling Chris up. Hey, now,
My mom doesn't even know what YouTube is, so
so we're pretty safe there, I guess. So moving on from Killer Clowns, Chris did talk about Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, and I think that Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 2 definitely has some slapstick or splat stick, as Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and all those guys refer to it as in the horror world. Even though it has elements of that in it, and I find myself laughing many times in Evil Dead 2. Army of Darkness is the pinnacle of the comedic stuff, and it definitely has a lot of Three Stooges gags in it. They're just all over the place. Plus, you have these Ray Harryhausen like dead-eye skeletons.
Oh, the skeletons. Yeah, that's straight out of Jason and Argonauts from Ray Harryhausen.
And you have Ted Raimi's voice saying, "I'm getting the hell out of here," and was running away. I mean, there's just so much comedy in the third installment. of the Evil Dead series. And I'm so shocked when I hear people say that they didn't care for Army of Darkness.
That's so bizarre to me.
And I'm not, putting anybody down for saying that they don't like it. It just, how can you have the progression? This is the question I would want to have for them. The natural progression of going from Evil Dead, which was primarily dark. There were some comedic elements, but it's primarily a dark horror film.
Yep.
You move into Evil Dead 2, there's a little more comedy in there. The stuff when the lamps are moving up and down and Bruce Campbell's going, oh, and doing all that stuff that, Chris was talking about earlier. You have his hand getting possessed and flipping him off and stuff after he cuts his hand off with the chainsaw. It runs around flipping him off, gets caught in a mouse trap or a rat trap, and he's just laughing because he's losing his freaking mind at this point because of the things that are happening. But the coup de grace is Army of Darkness. Sorry, Chris, I didn't want to talk.
Oh, no, you're fine. Go ahead. All I was going to say was that you're definitely right when it comes to that, because while there are comedic things that happen in Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, a lot more in Evil Dead 2 than the original. It's the coup de grace when it comes to comedy within that trilogy is Army of Darkness. And as I've said before on here, that was my Army of Darkness was my introduction to the Evil Dead trilogy. Because when my dad was working for a detention center at the time, they had like a little area for the teenagers that were in that detention center. They had like an area where they could watch movies and stuff. Right. Sometimes they got rewarded. So one day when they were that room wasn't accessible to them, I went to work with my dad. My dad said I could go in there and like watch movies or TV or whatever. And they had like a selection of these VHS tapes, and I didn't know really any of them. It was on the shelf, but my dad was like, here, this Army of Darkness, this is a good one. It's pretty good. And he didn't really tell me anything about it. He just said it was a good film that he liked. So I was like, okay, the cover looks cool. Got a guy here who's like got a chainsaw, and because I think on the cover he either has he has the chainsaw hand on the cover of the VHS, but he only has it like that one at the beginning before he turns it into the the mechanical hand.
Right.
But like I said, just that's really what all you had to go based off when you were renting videos at a video store on VHS back in the day, is just looking at the box and trying to figure out if this is going to be a good movie or not, if you knew nothing about it.
Yep.
So I watched Army of Darkness that day, and really that's just where it kind of the obsession began. Because I didn't know until like a little bit after that, that Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 were linked to Army of Darkness, because I hadn't saw those. All I know is that when I went to a video store after seeing Army of Darkness, I was seeing these two tapes that both said they had Bruce Campbell in them. And I was like, okay, I like Bruce Campbell in Army of Darkness. Maybe he's good in these too. And I had no idea that they were all linked. I did not know this was the same character. And then I watched it. I was like, holy crap, this is like the same Ash from Army of Darkness. But, watch. And I'm glad I watched those in that order now, because it kind of went backwards for me as far as the slapstick, because I loved that in Army of Darkness, the slapstick comedy, and I was expecting that in Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 as I began watching and realized that they were all linked together. But not finding those was awesome. As much slapstick comedy in Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, it was also relieving in a way, because like they feel very different of how they're filmed, and then the script and everything is a lot different from art, but all at the same time, it's just it works. It's perfect. To me, when it comes to horror movie trilogies, Evil Dead is perfect.
Yeah.
I feel like it is perfect in how it's like, because it starts off very dark, and it slowly kind of builds into more of a non-serious but entertaining at the same time way. And even if you watch the Ash versus Evil Dead TV series, it
Right.
evolves into even more of that into this in that series,
Mm-hmm.
because that kind of same slapstick, Three Stooges type comedy that was in Army of Darkness. And I'm so glad that that Sam Raimi decided to do that. To just
Yeah.
He decided to put those jokes in there of what inspired him, because he was slowly kind of like putting hints here and there, as from the Three Stooges type comedy in to the Evil Dead films. That's why even though there's not that much comedy in the original, he still is, if you look at the credits, all these deadites are listed as fake shimps as
Yeah.
his tribute to the Three Stooges. But there's a blatant joke in Army of Darkness when Ash is at the site with the three books, and then he doesn't say the right word, so he's
Yeah.
like, all
Right.
right, maybe that worked. So then everything kind of chaos unleashes, and the skeletons start coming up out of the ground, and then one grabs him by the tongue, and then he tries to do the thing that the Three Stooges would always do to block the poke him in the eyes, and then you see he starts going, huh, huh, and then all these skeletons fists come out of from all angles and punch him. It's just, oh my gosh, I love it. But I can kind of get that. I can kind of get when some people say, like you were talking about, that didn't really care for Army of Darkness,
Mm-hmm.
because there are just several people that I have met that just, as I mentioned earlier, don't really care for comedy horror, or comedy, within horror. And I'm just glad that's not me, because I feel like if you can't have a little bit of comic relief in something serious, it's going to feel like too serious. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to be a chore to get through.
And there's people out there that just they love just straight horror, as far as there's majority of the films or TV shows or whatever are just that dark theme related, like The Exorcist. To me there's no comedy within The Exorcist. It's just straight dark from start
Yeah.
to finish, dark tones to it. And I get there's people that are fans of horror that's just what they enjoy, and they don't want any kind of comedy, related to that to try to bring up, I guess, this make it more up spirited.
Mm-hmm.
And but to me, that's just something I need. I need because the world, especially nowadays, the world is kind of a depressing and dark place at times,
Unfortunately.
and you need a little humor every now and then. I feel like in your life to kind of take your mind off that depressing stuff sometimes.
Mm-hmm. You definitely do. And I remember I'll tell this little story real quick about at that point in time that the trailer started playing for Army of Darkness. I had already I saw Evil Dead 2 first. Then I saw The Evil Dead. And then for a few years, there wasn't any Evil Dead type movies. And then, what was it, 93, Chris, when
I
this
think
one
so,
came?
because if I'm not mistaken, Sam Raimi did Dark Man
Yeah,
shortly before he did Army of Darkness.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that seems right. So when the trailer started coming out for Army of Darkness, I was like, "Oh my gosh," because what they packed into those trailers was a lot of the comedic stuff where Bruce Campbell is being treated like a slave because he's went into 1300 AD, and they're wondering, why is this guy dressed like this? Why has he got a chainsaw hanging? What, and they have Henry and his men who they think Bruce Campbell's character of Ash must be a part of Henry and his men. So the main people are at war with Henry. So they just automatically think this weird guy that showed up must be one of Henry's men, you know. So you have that whole sequence where the main guy of like King Henry's men turn out to be pretty good guys by the end of the film, but they're adversaries with the other
with
people
Arthur and his men.
with
Yeah.
Arthur. So there's that whole big scene with Arthur and Ash, and it showed dominantly in the trailer where he tells Arthur, he says, "Your shoelace is untied." And he glances down. It's obvious they don't have shoelaces in 1300 AD. And he just punches him, sends him packing kind
You
of.
know, it's strange that they went that route after how Evil Dead 2 ends, because the beginning of Army of Darkness, when it goes into the medieval times part of is a little bit different from how Evil Dead 2 ends, because if when Ash arrives in the medieval times in the very last shot of Evil Dead 2, he's like, "Oh no, no," and then all the soldiers are like, "Hell,
Yeah,
hell," but it's very different, at the beginning of Army of Darkness, because they're quick to, like, you know, to think, who is this guy? Who is this intruder on our land? And
right.
then he becomes a prisoner because they automatically just assume he's one of Henry's men.
Yeah.
So I'm curious I don't know. Have you ever watched anything? Has Sam Raimi ever elaborated on that as to why he went with that decision?
I want to say, I don't think I've heard him specifically say um, why they did that. I wonder sometimes because Universal was the one that put Army of Darkness out.
Right.
So I'm wondering if it wasn't a
Well, that's
studio
very possible. I
interference.
didn't think about that,
Hmm.
because I do know, like, I've read interviews with Rob Zombie, and he said when he was doing the Halloween films, he said it was possibly the most miserable time of his career of working on films, because Universal, I believe, not was it Universal that was over that, maybe, or whoever the studio was that was over the Halloween film. It was the Weinsteins, I'm pretty sure.
Hmm.
So that's not Universal, but anyway, he said that they had so much input on those films other than what he actually wanted in them.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, when he did the Munsters, Universal was the same way on the Munsters, because there was so much more that he wanted to do with the Munsters, but it was Universal that had the final say on that.
Wow.
So I guess, that's possibly what it is with Army of Darkness. They just kind of had that, Universal had that pull of, like, hey, Mr. Raimi, I get this is what you want, but we got to go with what we want.
Hmm.
And just unfortunately, that's how it is sometimes with these studios.
Yeah, the studios a lot of times want to anticipate what the audience is going to want. And sometimes they can be correct, sometimes they can be wrong, sometimes they can be somewhere in the middle. And I think with Army of Darkness, if it was studio interference, it was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
It did not make me hate the movie as a whole.
Oh,
I
no, no.
enjoyed it. But Chris does bring up a very valid point that had you watched the other two films before you got to Army of Darkness, and you looked at like the end of Evil Dead 2 and the beginning of Army of Darkness, you might be like, wait a minute here. There's something not quite, it's not quite meshing very well. And or it could have been Sam Raimi just said, well, we got to get from point A to point B. Here's how I'm going to do it. But I'm trying to remember if I've ever heard him say, and I can't recall.
I
Uh,
have to ask you though, Dana, of the two endings for Army of Darkness, which one do you like the best?
I have to say I like the S Smart ending
Mm-hmm.
the best because to me, I think of it like this. I think I've heard Bruce Campbell say that the ending where he takes too many drops of the
Yeah,
stuff and
he
he
wakes up.
stays awake or stays asleep too long. And he's like Rip Van Winkle when he
Yeah,
wakes up and he's like, no, because it's way far, far in the future. I think Bruce Campbell said that that was the perfect ending for the Ash character. Because by that point, Ash had become such a jerk, a little bit of an asshole, that
mm-hmm.
that was appropriate for him. Okay. But I had more fun with that S Smart ending.
Yeah, me too. And I feel like it's more, it ends on a more positive note too, because with the alternate ending where he sleeps too long and wakes up and he's got like the beard and everything, it's it's funny and it fits, but at the same time it's like, I don't know, it's a negative like way to end things for Ash, this character we fell in love with. So I think the S Smart ending was the smarter route to go with that, as the way it kind of just it still left Ash with that egotistical charm he has.
That
Uh,
swagger, he still had his
um,
swagger with him.
but at the same time, I don't know if you've ever read the Army of Darkness comics, because
I
I have a good chunk of those, and they're definitely worth checking out. So in the comic book adaptation of the film, the way that the comic ends is the alternate ending where he sleeps too long.
Mhm.
And I feel like that works best for the comic, because the stories that followed with the comic series played off of that. So in the comic, Ash does find his way back
Right.
to his time. But then like it kind of goes into all these other like alternate dimensions within the comic book series. There's even one where, because the company that did the comics was, I believe, was called Dynamite Comics,
Mhm.
and there's at one point they partner up with Marvel Comics, because and Marvel was doing this series at the time called Marvel Zombies, where it's like an alternate dimension, where all of these Marvel characters like Spider-Man, the X-Men, Captain America, the Hulk, they were all becoming zombie versions of themselves. And like the last surviving, like, well, human, but he's actually a mutant. Magneto was the one that was the last one surviving, trying to battle all these zombie versions of the Marvel universe. Well, then after that came out, like I said, Marvel and um, Dynamite teamed up to bring Marvel Zombies versus the Army of Darkness.
Mhm.
So Ash gets teleported into that Marvel Zombie universe, and like he's had his experience with the Deadites, so he knows how to kind of take care of these Marvel Zombies.
Right.
So the funny thing about how that, and I hate to give this away if nobody has read it, but I just gotta say, because the way that book ends, Marvel Zombies versus Army of Darkness, that Ash he's trying to get transported back to his time and his within his universe. But at the end of the book, when he gets transported through the dimension into another dimension, he thinks he's back in his time and everything's normal again where he's supposed to be.
Mhm.
But he actually gets transported into another Marvel universe where the Marvel characters are werewolves.
Oh my gosh.
But there's all kinds of stuff that goes into those Army of Darkness books. There's an Army of Darkness versus Reanimator where he teams up with Herbert West, and there's a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash series. which was supposed to lead into a movie, but that never happened, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would love to read those. I just have never.
It takes some time. There's a lot now, like because they began the books. I want to say late '90s, early 2000s when they first brought out the film adaptation comic, and then it just continued after that. There's a lot of stuff, crazy stuff it goes into. There's one they did like a 4-issue limited series of called Ash Saves Obama. This is when Obama was the president at the time. So
Uh,
there's like a 4-part miniseries where Ash is like trying to protect Obama from all these deadites, and
that's
it's
hilarious.
hilarious stuff.
But I could spend like a month on just talking about Army of Darkness and the other Evil Dead films. And rest assured, there are some watch alongs coming up for the Evil Dead, the original trilogy at least. So y'all be on the lookout for that. Um, but moving on from that one, one that TJ brought up a little bit earlier, of course, was Return of the Living Dead, which is another one that kind of turns the George Romero stuff on its ear, turns it upside down quite a bit. And for you fans of, I'm a fan of Linnea Quigley too, but I think I'm a fan of Linnea Quigley for different reasons than guys are fans of her. But if you are of the male persuasion and you are a huge fan of Linnea Quigley, there's a lot of Linnea Quigley to see in this film,
Oh yeah,
including where she gets completely naked. She does have a what's called a cod piece over her nether regions.
she has stockings on too, Dana.
She does have stockings, but if you want to see her behind doing a dance on a gravestone, you're gonna see it.
Yeah, if I don't think he's in here tonight, but Super Batman nerd, I know he likes that scene a lot.
There's probably several, including my dear husband, is more than likely a fan of that.
That's one of my favorite movies Linnea's in, but it's not my favorite. I would have to say Night of the Demons is probably my favorite movie that Linnea's
One
part.
of the Demons is great. That's going to be going into heavy rotation here shortly for me and my Halloween
And
ones.
even Night of the Demons kind of, and I don't mean to go off track here, but it's even kind of comedy horror in a way.
Yeah, it is. It definitely does have some comedic elements to it, even after Angela turns into the demon and she's killing them off one by one and turning the others into these demons as well. There are definitely comedic elements to it. Um, but I love the even before people start getting turned into zombies in this. I love the banter back and forth between the main characters, not just the punks, but Tom Matthews' character of Freddie. And
Hmm.
he's got this new job working for a medical warehouse. And what goes wildly wrong when they start messing around with a barrel that was from the army that has this trioxin gas in it. And that's where the tar man comes out. And even the tar man is funny. The tar man is one of my favorite characters in this. You see him, and the first thing he says is brains. And he just,
Yeah.
the tar man is fantastic. Um, but the banter back and forth between uh, James Karen and even Clu Gulager in this, and Tom Matthews, all of that stuff. Oh, and
Don Caffa.
Don Calfa. Thank you, Chris. Don Calfa is absolutely hilarious in this. I
Yeah.
love Don Calfa.
And there's a lot of stuff Ian Cronin did that are both intentionally funny and unintentionally funny.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that's always been funny to me when watching Return of the Living Dead is in the scene when they're in the graveyard and Suicide's standing there, and then Linnea comes up to him, or Trash comes up to Suicide and is kind of like caressing him and all this, and he's like just still like not really talking to her, just more so talking to himself. He's like, "Think this is a fucking costume? It's the way of life." And I mean, that's always hilarious, but it's a good quote though, because at the same time, like it's funny, but it's also kind of applies to the way I feel. Like I love Halloween and all things horror, and it's not a seasonal thing for me. It's like
Right. Yeah.
it's a yearly thing. It's a yearly passion, or year long passion for me. Like it's for this stuff, horror and Halloween themed stuff, and like. I mean, I have a pair of jogging pants that I wear sometimes. It says every day is Halloween.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm like Suicide in a way, like the way of life.
Uh, I had a sudden idea for a T-shirt when you were talking about that, Chris. That if we could get Suicide on the shirt and have him talking about Halloween or horror movies,
That'd be
the
awesome.
way of life.
But like I said, there's just so like stuff that's intentional in Return of the Living Dead, like the when the trioxin comes out, and then they got the cadaver that's locked up in the one like the freezer
Yeah.
there where they work, and then they hear like a dog barking or whimpering, and it's like the half body of the dog. And so stuff like that, I think is definitely intentional, and
Yeah.
it works because it's like it's so fun because like you said, this was because John Russo wrote Return of the Living Dead, and he worked on Night of the Living Dead with George Romero. So basically, this is just kind of a huge tribute to Night of the Living Dead, but with its own comedy aspects. And they even talk about that in one of the opening scene between James Karen and Tom Matthews,
Yeah.
where he's like, "Did you ever see that movie, Living Dead?" He's so. I mean, that right there, right off the bat, it's like, yeah, this is one huge tribute to Romero,
Yeah.
and I think with Dawn of the Dead being the original Dawn of the Dead being my favorite horror film of all time, and just me loving Romero in general, just
Yeah.
everything he's done, um, that's why I feel like so connected to Return of the Living Dead as well, because it's just that movie wouldn't have happened without George Romero and him bringing Night of the Living Dead forward, and everything that came after that has just kind of been a tribute. Where any kind of zombie film, I feel that it's come after Night of the Living Dead, including Romero's, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
None of those would have happened, I don't feel, if it weren't for Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Return of the Living Dead has its like tributes to Night of the Living Dead, but it also has its own thing going for it.
Yeah. It's its own entity as well.
And that comedy thing stands out so much within that film, and it works because there's even little inside jokes hidden in the film. And if you look at the characters themselves,
Yeah.
Don Caffa and Clu Gulager's names are Bert and Ernie.
Ernie. Yeah.
So there's a Sesame Street reference right there within Return of the Living Dead.
And it's so wrong, but it's so right too to have that in this film.
And it's just linked to so many other things too. Like, you got Miguel Nunez in Return of the Living Dead who played the character Spider.
Yeah.
Well, then Linnea Quigley, who's also in Return of the Living Dead, went on to do Sorority Babes in the Slime Bowl-O-Rama, and her character's name was Spider in that film.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of like kind of like things that are all linked to Return of the Living Dead as well that will make you think, wow, like, this is actually an incredible film, and it shows that it has inspired, a lot of other filmmakers and stuff that they're working on too, because that's essentially what Return of the Living Dead is. It's like it drew inspiration from all these things that came before it.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it great.
And there's even things in the background, and I'm sure Chris saw this because he got the Bert and Ernie reference.
Yeah.
The eye chart.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Is one of those that amazingly enough, I noticed that right off because something I do, and Chris probably does this too. The more times you watch a film, and sometimes even the first time you watch it, you find yourself looking at things around the
Haven't looked at before, yeah.
And where it talks about Bert as a slave driver, and I was just like, that is so hilarious.
Yeah. So I can't remember when I first noticed that, but me and my brother-in-law CJ were talking about it not long ago, actually, because I think we were watching it on something, and he said, "Hey," he said, "Hold on, pause that." I was like, "What?" He's like, "Pause that for a second." And he goes, "No, go back a little bit. Okay, right there." And then he starts like reading the eye chart. I was like, "Oh, you've never noticed that before?" He's like, "No." So he thought that was great.
Doesn't it say Bert is a cheap son of a bitch and a slave driver?
Yeah, it says something like that. Yeah, I remember I forgot about the cheap son of a bitch one, but I just remember it saying like Bert is a slave driver or something. But yeah, that's really funny too that they put that in there. And you were talking about Tarman. So like Tarman is even comedic in his own way as well. And like I feel like they shot the stuff with Tarman all in like one, like session. Because if you look like how he appears later in the film when he shows up that second time, it looks exactly like the same shot that they showed earlier in the film, like when he eats suicides. Brains. So when they show him, it looks like the same shot, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure about that, but it looks the same to me. I imagine they would have done that too because the makeup effects on Tarman look awesome, and they still hold up to this day. That look is iconic to me, at least, and I feel like as elaborate as the makeup effects were on him, that would have to be something that they would want to film in one session, because I'm sure Alan Troutman, who played Tarman, I'm sure he didn't like wearing that outfit multiple times.
Probably not, even though it was a cool outfit. And like I say, I love Tarman so much that when I got the shoes that I ended up wearing to Horror Hound Weekend this past weekend, they are Return of the Living Dead shoes, and they have Tarman on one side of them. And I was like, I have to get these because I absolutely love Tarman.
And I feel like Tarman is kind of like the mascot for that movie, because you see so much of him in merchandise that's released for Return of the Living Dead. Rarely do you see any kind of merchandise released of Return of the Living Dead with the like singular characters of the human characters in the, like you'll see some stuff of Trash every now and then. Like they just Super 7 just released a while back that Trash figure, and I think I showed it on here one time a few months ago. But never have they made a Tina or Spider or Freddy. Well, I mean, I've seen some custom stuff, but I'm talking about like official licensed releases. I mean, you won't hardly see anything of Casey or Suicide or anything. Like they released some couple figures here recently through Super 7, and I think NECA is doing some 8-inch ones too of just zombie suicide and trash that's on the
Right.
poster, the original poster. So you'll see stuff like that, but majority of the stuff that will be released that you see, 9 times out of 10, it'll have Tarman
Yeah.
associated with it. But that's not a complaint or anything, because
No,
I
no.
love Tarman. I think he's an iconic looking horror character. And like I said, he's the unofficial mascot for that movie.
I feel like he is too. So before it gets too late, because it's just before 10, I was going to talk about a couple more. And then if Chris wants to add anything, he's welcome to do that. But I think I'm going to save the rest of them for, if we do a Friday Foolish. And
Yeah, because there's a lot more that I would love to talk about, but I don't want, like I said, I don't want to go on too long about it, because I know you probably got stuff you got to do. And
I got to tie things up for the night. And I know Chris probably got to tie things up for the night too.
because Russell actually mentioned one. It was the one I was going to talk about, but like I probably save it for another time, and that's Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein, because I could talk and talk and talk about that, because that's, as far as when it comes to Universal Monsters, that's my favorite film that involves the Universal Monsters, because not only do I love Universal Monsters, but I also love Abbott Costello.
Yeah.
So putting those together, it was like, was genius to me. I feel like that was like it was
That's a chocolate and peanut butter moment. What that is.
yeah. That's what inspired them to make Reese's.
But one of the ones I wanted to talk about as we tie this up is Reanimator. And what can I say about Reanimator that hasn't already been said? This is a movie, dare I say it, this was in my video rental days whenever I watched this for the first time. And my family sat down and watched this movie. I think about that now, and I think about the fact that Barbara Crampton is nude in that one scene, all laying out on the table, and Dr. Hill has got his head and he's bringing it closer. And I won't go into, extreme detail with that, but we'll just say it's probably one of the only times in a horror movie, at least, I've seen a head give head. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But it's amazing that me and my family watched that together. I'm not sure if Chris is frozen.
Oh, sorry, I was just zoned in listening to you.
I thought for a second I had lost Chris. I thought he was frozen.
Now, if you pay attention back there, you can see Ghost in the background.
Yeah,
He's moving
I
around.
see Ghost now. Bless his heart. He looks like he's relaxing.
Yeah, he's wore out.
But beyond that, this movie is just so much fun. It's so, and I could not imagine anybody other than Jeffrey Combs in the Herbert West role. If you tried to put anybody else in that role, I don't think it would work for me. This is like I don't know if it was a dream role for him, but he just encapsulates that kind of cocky, kind of half crazy, mad scientist type of character.
Kind of an asshole.
Kind of an asshole, yeah.
I mean, and a lot of people will compare the character Herbert West to Ash, because they both kind of have that cocky, almost kind of asshole-ish personality about them.
Mm-hmm.
And just to throw someone else in that kind of plays into that same type of personality is Reggie from the Phantasm films.
Yeah.
Because he has like that cocky, he's like a ladies' man type character, like, but don't take no shit from nobody.
I'm going to get a double barrel sawed-off shotgun.
Yeah. So they're all like, I always felt like that was like the trinity of asshole heroes in horror. Ash, Reggie, and Herbert. And they all have, even though they're kind of similar in ways, they're also all very different. Like Herbert West is that character is, like you said, was perfect for Jeffrey Combs. I don't think I could see anyone else playing that character but him. And back in March, at Horror Hound, they had the Reanimator reunion, and we went to the Q&A panel, and they were talking about when they were making the film. Stuart Gordon took Jeffrey Combs and Bruce Abbott to an actual morgue to like check out all the cadavers there and all that, and said that the guy that was like showing them around was like creepy as it gets, and was like very like upbeat about wanting to show them these dead bodies.
Yeah, I'm going to show you all these corpses.
But it's just hearing stories like that. I love that because I think it's interesting to find out like what happened behind the scenes, what led to them to get themselves more involved in the role that they were portraying in the films. And in Reanimator, there's some bizarre shit that goes down, and it just like I feel like all of those people, not just Jeffrey Combs, but Barbara Crampton, Bruce Abbott, even they got Peter Kent to play the one cadaver that's walking around like the naked cadaver, and that guy Peter Kent is Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double and all of his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that was casted perfectly for all those roles. I was glad to see Bruce Abbott come back for Bride of Reanimator, but it was just kind of upsetting that Barbara Crampton didn't get to be a part of that as well. But
yeah,
it is what it is, and I think it's Bride of Reanimator is great in its own way too. But I don't think anything will ever surpass the original.
no. This is the. I know I used the word coup de grace, but as far as Reanimator films go, this one is the one for me. It's the one I always go back to over and over again. And a lot of it is probably nostalgia from, my family actually sitting down and watching this. My mom thought it was kind of crazy, but, she still sat there and watched it with us. And uh, I just can't say enough good things about it. Now, some people might take a look at it and say, what in the world? I don't see what y'all see in this. This is just stupid stuff.
Well, it was a product of its time as well, because
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's probably some people, the newer generation of horror fans, that may not like it because of, it may trigger them as far as the stuff with the scenes with the cat. But if you just grew up in that time period or around that time period, when Reanimator came out and films like that were coming out, it's just, that stuff was more acceptable because people just looked at them as what they were. They were films. The stuff happening on screen is not real. It's just, it's part of a story. It's no different from, a graphic story you read in a book that was stuff that was being released. Look at stuff back from the 1800s as far as like Bram Stoker stuff within the original Dracula. I mean, there are things within that book that are very graphic, but because it's put on screen, it makes it a little bit different. But still, it was just during an era where people just could separate that from reality. We're in a time now, unfortunately, where some of the newer generation cannot separate
No.
things from
Everything triggers them. It doesn't matter what it is. But there's something that you got to keep in mind, that these were not movies that were made in the jungles somewhere where they could get away with doing anything
They
and
weren't
everything.
killing any real
They
animals.
weren't killing real animals. They weren't killing a real cat or anything like that. Now, the only movie I can think of that was, made in the States where they actually killed an animal. At the front of my mind is Friday the 13th. That snake was actually killed. And that scene where they're chopping the snake up with the machete, unfortunately, a poor snake. And I say poor snake because I have a pet snake. But generally speaking, animals were not killed in American and Canadian and British made movies. They were doing that sort of shit back in the jungles where you could do anything you wanted,
Yeah,
basically.
that kind of stuff you'll mostly see like in Italian based
Animal
films. Um,
films. Uh,
um, what was that one movie that we watched, Dana, a while back? We did uh, stream over it. It was where it takes place, at the beginning, like the killer. You already know who the killer is, and then he grabs like the Mickey Mouse mask,
oh,
and
was that Bloody Moon? Was
yeah, and Bloody Moon. So like, there's a scene in that in Bloody Moon where there's a snake that come, and then
Yeah,
I think they cut like the head off, and it's really so it's much like how you said in Friday the 13th that happens too.
yeah,
Um, but that was just something that was more common, like in international films, like from
yeah.
Italy and places in Germany and places like that.
Hmm. Yeah, Bloody Moon, that is the most.
It's
Just speaking of
crazy.
Bloody Moon,
Crazy.
it's the most competent Jess Franco movie out there.
Yeah, that's the only Jess Franco movie that I have seen thus far.
It's the pretty much the only Jess Franco movie I like because I've seen some of his other stuff and I don't much care for it.
I
But
have some of his stuff, but I've never watched it. Like, it was stuff I inherited from James,
mhm.
and I guess he was a fan of him. I never really talked to James about Jess Franco's, but I got some stuff on my shelf in there. Maybe I'll get around to watching it one of these days. I don't know.
Beware if exorcism or I think it's exorcism. Beware if you have that one, Chris, and you watch it because I love Bloody Moon. And so I was like, I gotta watch everything that Jess Franco's directed. So I bought Exorcism and I think I still have it. Holy crap. Um yeah, you want to watch orgies and stuff like that. That's what that movie is.
Now, is Jess Franco the one that did? I think it's called Virgin of the Living Dead.
Gosh, I'm trying to remember.
Because I've got that one in there on the shelf, but I can't remember. I've never watched it, and I can't remember who did it.
Yeah, I can't remember, Chris. That's why I wish Steve was up. I would ask him. He would probably know. Uh, but anyway, to get back to Reanimator real quickly here, we got off on a whole Jess Franco thing, which is fine. But,
That's my fault. Sorry.
oh no, that's fine. I had forgotten that we did a stream over that one. Um, but Reanimator, absolutely fantastic. It's crazy, good fun. Um, and I don't think anybody would not have fun with this film. Chris, do you have any closing thoughts on Reanimator before I move to this last?
Um, it's probably a top 5 horror film for me. Um, it's one I have revisited many times. Couldn't tell you how many times I've seen it, but like it's a lot. I'm not one of those people that keeps track of how many times like I watch a film. Like I know people I've talked to before. It's like I've seen The Exorcist 367 times. I'm like, well, how do you know how many times did you just start keeping track from the very first time that
Get
you
one of
watched
those
the movie?
counters or something. Start like it.
Like I can't never understand that, like, because personally, I've never done that with a film where, like, if I watch it, I like it, I say, this is the first time I've watched it, and then every time I watch it, I keep track of how many times I've seen it.
No,
I've
no.
never done that. I guess I just don't think to do that, but there may be somebody out there that does like doing that. But nowadays we have apps like Letterboxd that can keep track of that for you,
Yeah.
Which I just go on. I don't know if you have a Letterboxd app or not, but I go on there and I always
Steve
log where I watch
does,
and
but
stuff. And I don't ever like write reviews for them because I have friends that do like write reviews on every film they watch on their Letterboxd account. But anyway, getting off track again.
Candace said she had to step away for a bit, but did you talk about the Burbs? We did not talk about the Burbs.
I was going to, but we kind of went over talking about everything else.
But Candace, the great thing is that, if you want to, we could have a Friday Foolish talking about this, and we could definitely talk about the Burbs during
Yeah.
that one. I agree with you, Candace, that it is one of the greatest dark comedies of all time. The Burbs is. I absolutely love it. Um, but the final film I wanted to talk about tonight, and I don't know if this is one that Chris has seen. It's not Jekyll and Hyde together again, but it's Student Bodies.
I've not seen it, but I have it, and I'm eventually going to get around to watching it. Now, that cover, I always knew that cover, that Student Bodies cover.
Mhm.
There's another movie that I have seen though. I think it was released by Trauma that has a similar cover to that of like the girl like kind of spread it. It's called Splatter University.
Splatter University. I should have had that one in here. Me and Steve did a commentary over that several years ago. Oh my gosh. Because
Yeah.
Steve told me he used to make loop tapes, like loop cassette tapes of different things. And like for Blood Cult, there was this scene where they said there were fingers that ended up in the salad, and this guy's eating a salad from Wendy's, and all of a sudden he says, Jesus, and he spits his salad out because they said, we found some fingers in the salad. And Steve said he looped that a bunch of times where this guy was saying, Jesus. And he did that with Splatter University. There's this character that goes, wow, like that all the time, like smiling at these girls and stuff. Like it's very 80s, guys and gals.
Yeah.
All I can say.
That's a put it in a light way, yeah.
And so Steve said, yeah, I made a loop tape of that guy going, wow, a bunch of times. And I was like, Steve, you must have way too much time on your hands back in the day that you were doing that.
So
But
like I said, I've never seen Student Bodies. So is like Splatter University kind of similar? Is it similar to Splatter University, or is it
Splatter
like
University is just insane. But Student Bodies, okay, I think the big difference between Student Bodies and Splatter University for me is that Student Bodies, believe it or not, has a more coherent storyline than Splatter University does. Splatter University is one of those kooky, low budget trash movies that we all love, though.
Mhm.
That's where it makes it a little bit different than just your run of the mill trash. This is.
So would you say that Student Bodies is more closer to like Return to Horror High?
Yeah, I would say it's more on the level of Return to Horror High. Now, I'm not saying this film is not crazy because it starts out showing a house and it shows Halloween. It shows the title Halloween on the screen, but you hear a turkey gobbling, and that this you're in for a wild ride with this one. And then it has Friday the 13th show up on the screen, and then Jamie Lee Curtis's birthday. And then it goes into the movie after it shows Jamie Lee Curtis's birthday on there. And you go inside the house, and there's a girl that's babysitting. We've all seen this and dozens upon dozens of horror movies. But she gets a call from a weirdo known only as the breather in this movie. And when she picks up the phone, he's going, like that, just an exaggerated version of the breathing that we hear when a guy's got a mask on or something like that in a horror film. And then it progresses to he keeps calling and she picks it up and there's slobber coming through the phone and or drool or whatever you want to call it. And every time she picks up the phone after that, even when the parents or the people that own the house, she's supposed to be taking care of kids, I'm guessing, but you never see any kids. The adults come home, but you still never see any kids. But anyway, even when they come home, they pick up the phone and turn the handset around and you still hear the breather go on there. So you've got this whole comedy thing from beginning to end, basically. So you have people getting killed with hundreds of paper clips. You have people getting killed with eggplants. Have people getting killed with horsehead bookends. I kid you not, people, horsehead bookends.
Wow.
So
I gotta watch this
I'm
movie.
not saying it's not crazy. And then you have this guy who looks totally out of place, who looks like a college professor or something, sitting behind a desk. It just comes up right in the middle of the movie after they found some bodies. And he goes on to explain that rated R movies make the most money. And you have to have an explicit reference to the sex act. You have to have full frontal nudity, and there was something else uh, and I guess maybe cursing or something that he said. And he said, "So the producers of this film have asked me to say, fuck you." And then he kind of smirks, and then it goes back into the movie. He says, "Because this movie has none of that, the producers have asked me to say."
That's almost like in Gremlins 2, when like it kind of like it cuts in the middle of the movie, and then like because it shows like the film is being like ripped up and stuff, and it cuts
Oh,
to a movie in a movie theater, and like Hulk Hogan's in there watching the movie, and like then he starts like looking up in like the projection booth, and he's like talking to the gremlins and like messed up the film and stuff. So it's almost kind of like there's like a an intermission, in
yeah.
the film. And that's just I don't know if that's what it's like or not, but just the way you were describing it, that's what it sounded like to
Mhm.
me. Like there's
You
an
also
intermission within the film.
you also have a body count counter throughout the film. So every time a body shows up, it goes ding, 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 and it'll
Oh
show how many
wow!
people have gotten killed.
Oh, so this is very slapstick comedy.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a lot of fun with it every time I watch it. In fact, before we did this stream, I actually went back and watched it again because it's only about an hour and 25 minutes long. So if you want to have a good time and you want to see these homages to some of your favorite horror films kind of turned upside down, and they say before there was Scream, there was Student Bodies. Now, Scream, the thing about Scream is it has those homages. It kind of makes fun of the horror genre and embraces it at the same time. But Scream is more polished. This is not polished. This is raw. This has a rough edge to it. If you run your hand across it, you're going to get splinters. Okay. Scream's not like that, but Student Bodies is. And you're going to have fun with it. You're definitely going to have fun with it. They tout it as the world's first comedy horror movie. Now, I don't know. I don't think you could necessarily say that, but it sounds good anyway, to put on a
I
post.
always felt like the Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein
Right.
was the first like comedy horror,
Mm-hmm.
or at least one of the first.
Yep.
So maybe that's just they use, is that like a tagline for the movie or?
I think so, yeah.
Well, that sounds to me like that was just something they just wanted to use to kind of, I guess, get attention for the film, because that would be appealing, at least to somebody like me. That would be if I didn't know any better, and I
And
just
you saw that tagline, be like, okay. And you have other little things in there. You have a janitor who, his mental capacities are not that great. I'm trying to be politically correct here. I don't want to upset anybody. But his name is Malvert. And they're having a prom scene. And there's a running joke throughout the film where Malvert says, sometimes Malvert pee red. And so everybody's drinking this red prom punch at one time. And all of a sudden, Malvert shows up and he says, sometimes Malvert pee red. And everybody's spitting out their punch because they think, he's peed in the punch bowl.
That's kind of sounds like, in Sorority Babes and Slumbolorama, Buck Flower plays like the janitor
Yeah.
it's within the bowling alley. And he's kind of almost like one of the heroes in the film too. And that's just based off of your description, that's kind of just what that sounds like to me. Like, but they were using a lot of characters like that, around that time. Now that was in the 80s, but like there was a film in the 90s that had gosh, what was the guy's name? I think James Marsden and Katie. I can't remember what her last name is. She was on the girl from Dawson's Creek, but the movie was called. Oh my gosh, I lost my what it was called. Do you know what the movie I'm talking about, Dana?
It sounds familiar, but I cannot place the name of
But
it.
William Sadler is in it though, and he plays like this janitor at this school that's kind of has like they think that he has like he's mentally handicapped, but well, I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen it, but let me see if I can look that up real quick what it's called, and
Okay.
you can go on what you're talking about. Sorry about that. It's just a random
okay. My main point being that if you like a really strong comedy slant to the horror tropes, which I don't think Scream really had a strong comedy slant. They did kind of make fun of the horror genre in a nice way, and they did have all those horror tropes, and there were a few comedic moments in Scream, but not like Student Bodies. Like I said, Student Bodies is raw, very raw humor in this, and it's completely and totally making fun of the horror genre. I mean, when you have a killer who, there's one scene where he's trying to go up the steps to kill the babysitter upstairs and her boyfriend, and he keeps stepping in gum. There's gum on the steps, and he's going, and he says, sugarless. And he's just pulling he's got these gloves on, and he just keeps pulling that.
So instead of Scream, it sounds like Student Body was more like the precursor to Scary Movie.
Yeah, I would say,
the Scary Movie film, which obviously make fun of like the horror genre, especially like in the first Scary Movie, it's focused mostly on Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, because like the ghost face character in the first Scary Movie it's the ghost face costume, but his weapon is a hook.
Yeah, exactly.
Like from I Know What You Did Last Summer. So that sounds like, Student Bodies was kind of like, before all that. But that movie that I was talking about was called Disturbing Behavior.
Oh, okay.
So
I think I may have seen Disturbing Behavior, but it's been.
Yeah, I seen it for the first time probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I want to say. and I love it now that I've seen. But it's not like comedy horror or anything. It's just kind of a straight up like that '90s vibe horror, like
Right.
Scream and The Faculty, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and stuff like that that was coming out. But because those were all like focused around high schoolers, teenagers, which is what a lot of like '80s slashers was based around as well. But like I said, it just had more serious tones to it than any kind of like comedic stuff within it.
And I could go on and on about the different things in there, but I would urge you guys to. I'm not sure if you can find it on YouTube or where, or, you might be able to find it on Tubi or one of the other sites or services. Um, but I think you'll definitely have a lot of fun with it, especially if you're a horror fan. You're going to have a lot of fun with it. Um, because I just rewatching it before the stream, I had so much fun going back and revisiting it because it'd been a while since I watched it. Um, but Chris, is there anything that you want to bring up before we get off of here for the night?
Just that, I can't wait till we do another one of these on the same topic. Like, I think there's just so much more that
Oh,
we
there,
could go
yeah,
on and talk about, like, the Burbs, and like I said, Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein, or even, a couple of the scary movies.
yeah,
At least the first three, I think, were very solid films. But as far as I've watched them all, the scary movies, but I feel like they got less and less interesting with each
yeah,
one. I feel like the first one was probably the best one that they put out.
yeah. Me and Steve went back and rewatched that
I
recently.
even like Scary Movie 2 a lot, especially Chris Elliott's character with the strong hand, the little tiny hand he has, and I love that. Uh, but there's so much stuff that, like I was saying, when it comes to comedy horror.
Well,
Uh,
Tucker and Dale versus Evil. That's
yes,
the one
Tucker and
I
Dale
think
versus
you talk
Evil, but I think on this one we covered some pretty solid ones, some of the top ones when it comes to comedy horror: the Evil Dead trilogy, Reanimator, Killer Clowns. We those are some of the more popular ones.
about.
But yeah, like there's so much. I mean, if you look at it in a way, like it's not exactly comedy horror, but there's comedy elements to horror films. There's a ton of stuff. You can look at trauma. There's a ton of
Oh,
trauma stuff.
yes.
There's a ton of full moon stuff out there.
Yep.
It's got comedy elements to it. I mean, there's just so much to cover, really. But we got to take it one day at a time, right?
Right. And I think Candace is game. She says yes, 100%. So she's game for us doing an upcoming Friday Foolish on this. And perhaps Chris can hop on with us and talk
Oh
about
yeah,
things when we
yeah.
do that. But I want to thank Chris, first of all, for being my co host on this stream tonight. It was a lot of fun. I felt like I was, and I told Candace a little bit about this, I felt like I was getting into a, a funk and I was not really putting out a lot of content. And so this has kind of reinvigorated me, re energized me, just getting on here and talking with Chris for a couple hours about comedy horror. And I think that's just what I needed. And I hope Chris had a good time as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. I had a great time with this, and like I said, I can't wait for the next one we do on this same topic because, as I said, there's a lot of ground to cover when it comes to comedy horror.
Yeah, I
And
didn't realize how much ground till I started looking at these titles.
and like Ric Flair said back in the '80s, whether you like it or you don't like it, it's the best thing going today.
That's a good quote. But I also want to thank the chat. There at one time, the chat was pretty active with people putting things in there. And I want to thank everybody that was in the chat tonight, keeping it active and bringing up different things that kind of jogged me and Chris's memory and made us start, talking about other things as well. But I guess me and Chris will be off like a couple of dirty shirts. We don't have dirty shirts on, but we're going to be off like dirty shirts. But before we get off here, I want to remind everybody, as I always do, and trust me, as soon as I get off my lazy butt, there is a shirt coming with this saying on it. I want to remind everybody to be kind to one another and blaze that trail. We're getting ever closer to the weekend, folks. Tomorrow is Thursday. Um, I hope many of you are off for the weekend, and Chris is probably wanting these last few days to stick around a little bit longer because he's on vacation. But
Well, I mean, I still got what? Tomorrow's Wednesday, and or wait a minute, today's
Thursday,
Wednesday, right?
yeah, tomorrow's Thursday.
Gosh, I've already lost track of my days.
See, that happens when you go on vacation for a
But
week.
yeah, today's Wednesday, so I still got Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I still got 4 days.
Okay,
That's good.
yeah.
And it's not like I have to just when Monday comes around, I gotta leave the house or anything. So,
No, Chris and me, we're lucky. We get to work from home, so
yeah.
we don't actually have to pick up and go anywhere. I think it makes it a little bit easier. I roll out of bed and drag myself back in my pajamas to my
And
desk.
I was going to ask you too, Dane, before we get off of here. Are you guys still planning on going to Scarefest next month?
Yep, yep. I've got media passes, so we
So
should.
what day are you guys going?
Well, uh, if y'all are going on Sunday, I don't think we're going to see you because we're going on Saturday. I
Well,
won't.
guess what? We're going on Saturday too. That's what I bought my ticket. That's what I bought my tickets for.
Oh wow!
I was looking at the show and I was like, okay, so Sunday would be it would be a much more laid back day, maybe. I don't know for sure. But it also is just around like I think 5 hours that day. So with on Saturday, I think it's like 7 or 8 hours. I think the show lasts on Saturday, and it was only maybe like $10 more for the ticket to have a long. I said, well, there's going to be a lot going on this year at Scarefest. I want to check out as far as panels go. Some of the guests go. They got over 100 guests
Yeah.
this year, and could possibly be Clive Barker's last convention. So when I bought the tickets, I went ahead and secured the photo op with Clive Barker too.
Right.
So I know that he stated earlier this year that 2024 would be the last year he's doing conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And this convention is pretty close to the end of the year, and I haven't seen him announce for any other shows past Scarefest. So
Okay.
this could
Now,
very well be his last appearance, folks.
is Clive Barker having some health issues, Chris?
Oh yeah, some bad ones.
Thought he was.
So they do have some rules set up for that, and where he's going to be in a room by himself, but he's going to also not just have a table in there where he's signing autographs and stuff, but they're going to have like his art displayed and a whole like tribute to him within that room. And when you enter that room, from what I understand, is that they will issue you a face mask if you're like meeting him at his table. But if you're doing the photo op with him, you don't have to wear a face mask, and he's not going to be wearing one either. So I kind of confused by that, but at the same time, I'm not going to question it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might think about at least meeting him, even if I have to wear the face mask. I'll do it.
Yeah, I have his autograph because I had someone get it for me years ago at a show on my Hellraiser laser disc. So I don't need to get his signature again, but I just would like to just meet him, even if it's just for a brief moment within that photo op. I can just say, it's good to meet you. Thank you for your work that you've done. That's entertained me over the years.
He's done some amazing work over the years. I will say that. He's like the, he's like the British equivalent of Stephen King, is what I think.
Yeah, I've always said the same thing. Like he's like the British Stephen King. And that's so funny because, like, as long as I've been a fan of Clive Barker, I've always said that same thing. because Stephen King is probably my favorite author of all time. And then second would probably be R.L. Stein, because I just grew up on like the Goosebumps books and stuff too, and it might be a nostalgia thing with me, but it's what I like, and it is
Well,
what it is.
I used to like the R.L. Stein, the Fear Street stuff when I was a kid.
Candace was big, and I don't think I've ever read a single Fear Street book, but Candace had like, I don't know what happened to him. Like, she had a massive collection of Fear Street books, and then like we thought they were in storage, and then they just up and disappeared. Don't know what happened to them.
That's a shame though, because those were a great series of books. I liked them a lot.
But yeah, Dana, I do. I would, if you really would want to meet Clive Barker, I would say this is the time.
Yeah, well, I've got those media passes. It means I'm going to get in free, so I might as well, take that opportunity to.
Yeah, because this could very well be it. This could be the last show he does, and I don't think he's going to do any kind of like any appearances beyond that either. I think he said when that didn't just include convention appearances. I think that just included public appearances as well, anywhere. So that's why I wanted to go ahead and get that photo op, because I said this could be my only shot of getting to meet him.
Do you mind me asking how much the photo op was?
It was $100.
I guess. Well, Steve would say, "Oh God," because
I feel like it's worth it to me, because I've wanted to meet him for a long time, and also the guy's not doing great. This could be my only chance to just get to talk to him and meet him and everything. And if it's normally I wouldn't pay that much for a single person photo op. I have before. I've done it with Robert Englund, but it's just when it's one of those guys that you have admired their work for as long as you've been a horror fan. I feel like that's worth it with those people. Like some of the newer, more modern actors that haven't had a very long and illustrious career yet, if they're charging those same prices, like Catherine Newton, who was just at Horror Hound, I think her photo op was $105 plus taxes and fees. See, I can't do that with someone like that.
Yeah, I looked at that, and I looked at a lot of the younger actors and actresses, and I was like, what?
But if you just look at guys like Robert Englund, like Clive Barker, John Carpenter, guys like that are legends within the horror industry, it's a little bit different in that aspect, because you feel like they've paid their dues to deserve that, to ask that kind of asking price.
Yeah, they paid their dues.
But even though I don't like it, I don't like paying it. But it's just sometimes it is what it is. And like if I had to pay $100 to be what might possibly be the last appearance of Clive Barker, I'm gonna do it, and I did. So I'll see you there, Clive Barker.
Yeah, there you go. So I guess me and Chris are gonna call it a night. But again, thank you everybody that was in here, or maybe even if you weren't chatting, if you were just watching. I don't call it lurking, I call it watching. Some people don't feel comfortable coming in the chat and talking, but they like watching people talk about different topics. So I want to thank everybody that was in here, whether you were chatting or whether you were watching, whether you watched 5 minutes or the whole 2 hours and 39 minutes that we were on here. God bless you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you guys and gals supporting the channel, supporting me and Chris, or me and Candace, or whoever is on here with me on a particular stream or video. But we're going to call it a night, but I'll be back tomorrow with another Kubrick show, Kubrick Among Us. So be sure to tune in for that. We'll be talking about another couple of the Kubrick films. And we're out of here for the night, folks. We'll see everybody next time. Bye, folks.
Hi, everybody.